from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, and our phone number, if you want to join this late-night national town hall conversation, feel free to do so, 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. And it is Wednesday, it's the Wednesday edition, and lots and lots. There's always a lot going on, but some days more than others. Today's one of those days where I wasn't sure. How do we start? Do we start with Trump about an hour ago, wiping the floor with just about everybody at that CNN town hall? Or do we go with James Comer dropping all these bombshells? I'm still torn, but I think we're going to start with a little bit of the Trump because you've probably heard some of the Comer throughout the day, and we'll get to that as well in the next segment and moving forward throughout the evening. But Trump was in CNN in their stomping grounds, and he was participating in their town hall. And I want to take a moment to be fair and say kudos to CNN for even having a town hall and inviting Trump. And I say that because when was the last time you saw any prominent conservative on CNN? Now, this is not because conservatives hate CNN. I've always wanted to go on CNN. They never invite me. Dan Bongino used to go on CNN, and eventually I guess they stopped inviting him because he would answer their questions and refute some of their points, and they would pull his mic, and he would be talking by himself, and you couldn't hear anything. I mean, that's how unfair it is when you go on that network. You don't see that happen on any other network. You really don't. But fascinating to see that, while he was still there talking, they would just shut him up. And not because he was talking over anybody, because he was actually just giving his response and they didn't like it. So that's what's going on there. But Donald Trump was at the CNN town hall just about an hour ago or so. And we've got some audio from that I want to get to. I want to start with a quick clip of former President Trump at the CNN town hall in New Hampshire tonight. Moderator is Caitlin Collins, explaining to Americans why they should vote for him in 2024.
Why should Americans put you back in the White House?
Because we did fantastically. We got 12 million more votes than we had in, as you know, in 2016. I actually say we did far better in that election. Got the most that anybody's ever gotten as a sitting president of the United States. I think that when you look at that result, and when you look at what happened during that election, unless you're a very stupid person, you see what happens. A lot of the people in this audience, and maybe a couple that don't, but most people understand what happened. That was a rigged election, and it's a shame that we had to go through it. It's very bad for our country. All over the world, they looked at it, and they saw exactly what everyone else saw. You look, even if you just look recently with the 51 intelligence agents, that made a 16-point difference.
All right, so that's the beginning of Trump's commentary on the CNN town hall, but it doesn't stop there. He went through a lot, and we've got a lot that I'm going to go over, but I wanted to get to a couple of quick highlights before we get to the break. So I'm going to move quickly here, and we're going to go to this cut here where he explains how he would revive the economy. Number 7, go right ahead.
My question is regarding the economy. Over the past 2 years, we have seen the prices for everything skyrocket. From food to gas to utilities and insurance costs, many people's bills are up several $100s a month, including mine. If elected president again, what is the first thing you would do to help bring down the cost to make things more affordable?
Drill, baby, drill. You know that one. So we were energy independent. We were soon going to be energy dominant. And nobody had ever done what I did. We got oil down to $1.87. Actually, it fell lower than that in some cases. We had to save the oil companies. The price was getting so. we were doing incredibly. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country, probably the greatest economy in the history of the world. We were energy independent, soon to be energy dominant. We were going to be bigger than Russia and Saudi Arabia put together ×2. We have more liquid gold under our feet than any other nation, And these stupid fools ended it. And energy went from $1.87 and even lower for gasoline, for a car. They went from $1.87 to $5, $6, $7, $8, and even $9. And your electricity bills went through the roof, your heating bills went through the roof. And that's what started inflation. And it hasn't stopped because people are paying now for bacon and for eggs and for the 2 and 3 times what it was just a little while ago. We created the greatest economy in history. A big part of that economy was got you the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country, bigger than the Reagan cuts.
So now Trump is on a roll here, and you can hear the applause in the background. And that was his response to Danielle Reiger, one of the town hall participants. And he also had some choice words for the moderator, Caitlin Collins. Listen to this.
What's the answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to. You're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
Can you answer why you held on to the documents?
I was negotiating, and we were talking to NARA.
All right, so that is the crowd at the CNN town hall. I love it. I mean, this is classic Trump. I was waiting for him to say, "Nope, only Rosie O'Donnell." It was terrific. And there's a lot more of those clips that we have. We're going to play those for you throughout the evening. I just wanted to give you a taste of that because, again, I know that this just happened about an hour ago or so. So I figured it would be a good place to start. But there's a lot going on, right? At midnight, Title 42 expires. And a little bit later, we're going to have Chad Wolf, former Secretary of Homeland Security during the Trump years. He's at the border, and he's going to be joining us live with a report from the border to give us his take on what's going on at the border. Plus, we're going to have some conversation on what's going on with China. Of course, China continues to aggravate situations all over the globe, and we're going to have that discussion as well with Frank Gaffney. And we're also going to connect with John Solomon from Just the News. He's the editor-in-chief there. He's going to clue us in on a couple of things. He's got a brand new book. Plus, he also is going to give us the latest on Hunter Biden, the indictment that may be coming any day now, or is it actually coming ever? Plus, the bombshell that came from James Comer earlier today, chairman of the Oversight Committee, announcing that Biden has received more money than they even thought, and listing the bank accounts and the foreign entities that dump these monies into these accounts. So we're going to discuss that as well. Plus, announced today, or finalized today, I should say, President Biden's administration will begin starting tomorrow on Thursday the Trump policy at the U.S.-Mexico border for asylum. Now, while stopping short of a total ban, this measure imposes severe limitations on asylum for those crossing illegally who didn't first seek a legal pathway. So, in effect, they have to either apply online or stop at the port of entry in their country, at the first legal, safe legal country on the way here. So this is pretty exciting stuff. And this is a modification from the original Biden strategy, which was to do nothing, to implement the Trump strategy on asylum at the Mexican border. So straight ahead, John Solomon's scheduled to be with us. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, so today, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, held a press conference announcing some of what they found in their report into Joe Biden. And again, they're talking about Joe Biden, not necessarily Hunter Biden and his activity as a bagman, but in particular, Joe Biden and his activities that they found to be less than ethical. Listen to this.
We want to discuss information the committee has learned since our last press conference in November. New information investigators have uncovered regarding the transfer of money from foreign entities to the Biden family. Many of the wire payments occurred while Joe Biden was vice president and leading the United States efforts in these countries. First instance, while Vice President Biden was lecturing Romania on anti-corruption policies, in reality, he was a walking billboard for his son and family to collect money. Hunter Biden and his associates capitalized on a lucrative financial relationship with a Romanian national who was under investigation for and later convicted of corruption in Romania. The Bidens received over $1 million for the deal. And 16 of the 17 payments to their associates' account that funneled the Bidens' money occurred while Joe Biden was vice president. In fact, the money stops flowing from the Romanian national soon after Joe Biden leaves the vice presidency. This is a pattern of influence peddling. This appears separate from any payment Hunter received from his work connecting this individual to a U.S. law firm.
Now, that's James Comer, again, at the press conference today, discussing how more than $1 million from a Romanian official that's under investigation ended up in Biden's bank account. But he goes on to explain how Biden has lied that his family didn't receive any money from China, or as El Trompito would say, China. Listen to this.
They also couldn't explain why the Bidens received over $1 million in 16 different wire transfers over a period of 3 months to at least 5 different banks. The president, when confronted with this information, said it wasn't true. Instead of being honest with the American people, President Biden has claimed since the 2020 election that his family has not received money from China. That was a lie in 2020, and he continues to lie to the American people now. The Bidens have received millions of dollars from China. It is inconceivable that the president did not know it. The White House refuses to correct the president's statements, showing the president is now using the federal government to run interference for his families and his own role in these schemes.
Now, the White House, of course, is continuing to deny, right? Any allegations against President Biden or his family from the House Oversight Committee. The information that came out earlier today reveals these new details about the Biden family, including Hunter receiving millions of dollars, the rest of the family receiving money in different ways, and from foreign entities in China and Romania at the same time that Biden was vice president. Right, that's what we know as in so much as what they're saying. The documentation that was presented by the committee for the Oversight Committee demonstrated precisely where these funds came from and that everyone involved must have been asleep that day at money laundering school. That's a quote from Representative Burkett, and that's pretty funny. Must have been asleep at money laundering school. That's terrific. Because the evidence is so blatant that large amounts of money were filtered out to at least 9 members of the Biden family. Now, Burkett called the evidence in the documents very obvious and said the president is a dwindling old man and doesn't know what day it is, which will probably be their defense eventually, that he did not know what he was doing. Burkett said that if the issue was a few $1,000s, it might be able to be explained away, but not for $10 million distributed amongst members of the Biden family. Burkett insisted that the Justice Department needs to do their job. So that's where they are in this thus far. Now it doesn't end there, right? We have more audio from the committee that I want to get to. Forgive me, I'm trying to catch my place here. So many moving parts to this. Because they also talked about the whistleblower claim that they had, I don't know, maybe about a week ago. And the information is somewhat complicated. It's very suspicious, and it involves over 20 companies that the Bidens have used. Listen to this.
The committee has reviewed thousands of bank records from individuals and companies affiliated with the Bidens and their associates. It has received these bank records pursuant to 4 subpoenas I've issued to different banks. These were targeted and specific subpoenas, and each was different based on the information we believed the banks possessed. Every one of those subpoenas returned valuable information that had been unreported and that contributed to this committee's understanding of how the Bidens conducted their businesses. The committee is concerned by the complicated, suspicious network of over 20 companies we have identified the Bidens and their associates used to enrich themselves. Most of these companies were limited liability companies formed during Joe Biden's vice presidency. The bank records show the Biden family, their associates, and their companies received over $10 million from foreign nationals and their companies.
Now, again, this whistleblower information that came from an FBI informant is still unavailable, right? The FBI is continuing to refuse to give Congress the informant's file where it's alleged that Biden took bribes twice as vice president. And I think this is pretty serious stuff because this is exactly what the Oversight Committee is supposed to be doing, getting to the bottom of things like this. And Comer, like he just mentioned, he issues these subpoenas requiring those banks and the FBI to turn over the documents that they're requesting. Noon Wednesday, so earlier today, was the deadline, but the Bureau instead replied with a 6-page letter raising various objections. Among them, quote, information from confidential human sources is unverified and by definition incomplete. And that's from acting FBI Assistant Director for Congressional Affairs, Christopher Dunham, who also argued that informant reports must also be kept private to protect those sources. Now, of course, you know, like everything else in the government, they could run a big black line through something and redact it to protect those sources, methods, and et cetera. But, you know, they're making excuses. It goes on to say, as it's clear from the name itself, confidentiality is definitional. I don't know that word. Definitional. Anyway, to the FBI's confidential human source program. Dunham wrote, confidential human sources often provide information to the FBI at great risk to themselves and their loved ones. The information they provide also can create significant risks to others who may be referenced in their reporting. Again, another big black line redacting, you know. So I told blank blank that blank blank was doing blank blank. Right. But ultimately, if we know that Joe Biden is the person that we're looking for, that Joe Biden, then vice president, took bribes on 2 occasions. Thank you very much. We don't need to know the name of the person. We just know that this is a legitimate FBI source. And now we have the information. You complied with your congressional subpoena and voila. But not so fast. The FBI is saying, not so fast. We're not giving you the information. So straight ahead, we're going to hear from Jim Jordan, what he had to say at the press conference today. Because the Judiciary Committee is going to weigh in on this too. Don't go anywhere. Keep it locked right here. I am Rich Valdez.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And as I mentioned, Representative Jim Jordan Congressman Jordan, who chairs the the Judiciary Committee in Congress, he also had some remarks today. Check this out.
Again, the fundamental question is, what did they do to warrant the receipt of millions and millions of dollars? Why did Joe Biden's brother, why did Joe Biden's sister-in-law, why did Joe Biden's son, why did so many family members get the money? What did they do to warrant receipt of that money? That's the fundamental question. Chairman Comer and the team have done great work, and they're determined to get answers to those fundamental questions.
Now, I just want to reiterate that the bank records that Congress brought forth today, Comer and the Oversight Committee, these records show that the Biden family received $10 million in payments from China and Romanian foreign interests. This is interesting because I know everybody thinks, well, lots of people get money and lots of this. And we have to remember that there is no family business in the Biden family, right? They can't say, well, we build hotels or we build golf courses or we print T-shirts. There is none of that, right? They don't have a business. I think the one daughter has a business, and kudos to her. Everything that they sell is made in the USA. But outside of that one daughter who has a clothing line that I don't think anybody's, most people listening to this program likely haven't heard of. That's it. She's the entrepreneur of the family. Outside of that, they've all made money by being involved in this. Now, some could say, well, no, Hunter Biden, he's created all these businesses and he's a tremendous entrepreneur. This is what we're debating, right? Is he an entrepreneur? Did we start these companies to make it look like there's a reason I should be getting paid? Basically, you can't give me the money because it'll look like a bribe, Jack. Come on, man. Hire my son Hunter to do X, Y, and Z and pay him $80,000 a month. There you go, pal. And then he says, I've got to give 50% to the big guy, and I've got to do this, and I've got to do that. So all the pieces start to fit together. And again, I think it's better to be skeptical than to just be dismissive on something like this, where we go, well, no, let's not jump to conclusions. No, jump to the damn conclusions, please. By all means, jump to them. Because the option of remaining calm and saying, well, let's see, let's cooler head prevail, will do nothing for you. It'll do nothing to stop corruption. It'll do nothing to protect our country. So I think something that's this egregious, when you think your president is on the take, in any other company or country, the board of a company or a nonprofit would likely either marginalize somebody with a leave of absence, a forced leave of absence, a suspension, ultimately maybe even a no confidence vote and a termination or a request to resign. And we've seen this happen in different organizations. So I don't see why, Congress, who's in charge of oversight here, isn't being a little even more aggressive. And I think they should be. I think we should also, as Americans, turn some attention to the cabinet and say, hello, excuse me. We as Americans, you are our last line of defense, right? You are the ones that can invoke the 25th Amendment. And as such, we're looking at you for that leadership. Now, of course, I know that's pie in the sky thinking. I'm probably asking for too much here, but that is the way it's supposed to work. Anyway, these bank records and other records that were made public today by the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability, they show a complex money laundering scheme. This is according to the Epoch Times, that involves millions of dollars from foreign entities that investigators say went to President Joe Biden and nearly a dozen members of his family. Right, so this is not just a happenstance. Well, no, my son happened to do business with that. I know I never got involved in my son's business, but you're talking about a dozen members, or nearly a dozen members. Let's call it 10 plus. That's crazy, right? I mean, unless, we can say, no, we've hired them all in the administration. We've hired them on the campaign. These were monies. We sold them services. What services did you sell them? What business is your family in? That would make so much more sense, right? At least then we could say, oh, you use your business as a guise to launder money. But here there isn't even a family business, right? It's not like the Bidens are infamous for something other than politics. In a 36-page memo summarizing these findings, they established that the Biden family members received payments from private clients, corporations, and foreign governments, including China and Romania. And again, a quote from this was that Biden family members and business associates created a web of over 20 companies. Most were limited liability companies formed during Joe Biden's vice presidency. The memorandum reads, bank records showed the Biden family, their business associates, and their companies received over $10 million from foreign nationals and associated companies. I think this is a big deal. I think this is something we should stop and take a look at. I don't think that this is small potatoes. But again, historically, when we've seen big bombshell allegations like this, what's happened? Our good friend Devin Nunes had the courage of 1,000 men when he stood out there and read the infamous Nunes memo. And God bless him for doing it. He's a patriot. And the media just, didn't bat an eye. They're like, yeah, all right, thanks, pal. Appreciate it. More Russian disinfo. You guys are sold out. I mean, it's like their canned response instead of saying, you know what, let me be inquisitive here. Let me have some curiosity and see where this leads. Let me tug at this thread a little bit to see what happens next. But nope, that's not part of what's happening in the conversation. So we will continue to see what happens here with Comer. Plus, I also wanted to get to a couple of things, a couple of other things that I mentioned in Trump's town hall. He actually he discussed why he even agreed to do the CNN town hall, which he said could turn into a disaster for all, including me. He said, but the cable network made him an offer he couldn't refuse. We'll find out more straight ahead. Give us a call, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. So we've got, let me see, what do we have here? We have Donald Trump. Donald Trump playing janitor tonight, mopping the floor with the folks at CNN. We have a couple of clips of audio that I didn't play before that I wanted to get to. Trump also addressed several topics, right? He talked about what would happen with respect to him being elected again and why people should do that. We discussed that. He also went into somebody point blank asking him, can we count on you to stop talking about election fraud? Can you put an end to that? Clip number 3, and here's what he had to say. Check this out.
Will you suspend polarizing talk of election fraud during your run for president?
Yeah, unless I see election fraud. If I see election fraud, I think I have an obligation to say it. And you know what we went through a short while ago has really put our country in a big problem. I hope to do that. I hope we're going to have very honest elections. We should have voter ID. We should have one-day elections. We should have paper ballots instead of these mail-in votes. But the answer is yes, and I hope that it's going to be very straight up, because if it's going to be straight up, we're going to win the election.
So you will suspend talk to his question about the 2020 election on the campaign trail?
I guess we're going to just win. We're at a point now. We're getting so close. Let's just win it again and straighten out our country.
You gotta love that. Anyway, so yes, Trump, he didn't stop there. He also made references to the United States Constitution and the rules cited within regarding elections. Check this out.
The Constitution says that we're supposed to have legal and well-maintained and well-looked-at elections, and we didn't have that. I cherish our Constitution, but we have to live up to the Constitution. We weren't living up to the Constitution.
Now, of course, he covers a plethora of things here, from the economy to January 6th to elections and why Americans should vote for him. He even covered the verdict that came out just yesterday against him. Check this one out. Number 6.
A Manhattan jury found that you sexually abused the writer E. Jean Carroll and defamed her. You've denied this. But what do you say to voters who say it disqualifies you from being president?
Well, there aren't too many of them, because my poll numbers just came out and they went up. I'm the only person in history who had a charge like that. And usually you leave office, you say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to back home. I'm back home to my family and everything. I'm going to be resigned. My poll numbers went up, and they went up with the other fake charge, too. Because what's happening is they're doing this for election interference.
And, of course, I believe Trump is right on that one. Nobody brings these charges 4 years later, right? I mean, come on. And actually, this is an 8-year-old case. So it would be tough to deny that or easy to deny it if it wasn't, in fact, happening right now. If it would have happened a long time ago, then great, voila. They were just doing their job. But instead, everybody who actually had a stake in investigating this decided, oh, we're not going to do it. And then finally, they go out on a limb to do it in the New York City prosecutor's office. And every lawyer, either side of the aisle, other than the lawyer that's prosecuting the case, Alvin Bragg, seems to think that this is an egregious overreach. So anyway, Trump was given the tea, right? He was dishing the tea today on why he agreed to even do the CNN town hall, admitting that this, quote, could turn into a disaster for all, including me. But he says that the cable network made him a deal he couldn't refuse. And he said most of this on Truth Social in one of his posts. And he said he's doing the CNN town hall. They're desperate to get those fantastic Trump ratings again. And he said it'll be moderated by CNN This Morning host Caitlin Collins, who earlier he called a nasty. You're a nasty person. And he said this could be the beginning of a new and vibrant CNN with no more fake news. Or it could turn into a disaster for all, including me, he said. Trump also added that they made him a deal he couldn't refuse, though he didn't exactly say what the deal entailed. I think it had to do with just being as fair as they knew how to be. Again, it's CNN, so they're not going to be that fair. But I think they gave him a chance to respond. They didn't cut his mic off. And I think that's a start when we're talking about CNN. So don't go anywhere. Keep it locked right here. Your calls and more straight ahead. Our phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So, there's always the debate when we talk about immigration about we can't say that people are, no individual is illegal. We shouldn't call them illegals. We should call them undocumented. And now we've gone from undocumented to just straight up migrant, excusing the illegality of it. And if you don't want to use the word illegal, how about unlawful, right? Because that's certainly what it is, right? It may not be by some legal arguments, it's not illegal, it's unlawful. Okay, it's more than semantics for some, no problemo. I'm willing to go that route. But good old Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman, she says that we should never call anyone illegal. Check this out.
No human being is illegal. I believe that in my heart. I will continue to fight to make sure that we pass some sort of form of comprehensive immigration reform that gives our immigrant neighbors the dignified pathway, legal pathway to citizenship they deserve. I look forward to voting against this horrible racist bill, and again urge my colleagues to vote no.
Now, that is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, and this is the same Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib that wanted to host an anti-Semitic event at the Capitol. And good old Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House, kudos to him, said, nope, not happening. He canceled the upcoming event at the U.S. Capitol hosted by Representative Tlaib that would have decried Israel as a quote-unquote catastrophe for Palestinians and the world. Tlaib had sought to reserve space at the Capitol Visitor Center to mark the Nakba, a Palestinian term for the 1948 founding of Israel that translates to the word catastrophe. McCarthy decried her plans as anti-Semitic and used his seniority to reserve the event space for himself. The event will instead commemorate Israel's 75th anniversary, which will land on May 14th. This event at the U.S. Capitol is canceled, McCarthy tweeted late Tuesday, which is earlier today. Instead, I will host a bipartisan discussion to honor the 75th anniversary of the U.S.-Israel relationship. Neither McCarthy's office nor Tlaib's office responded for a comment. What more comment do you need if he has a comment in writing saying that the event at the U.S. Capitol is canceled? Instead, he's going to host. I think that's actually a written statement on Twitter. And it's so fascinating the way they put things in here. Anyway, I guess they mean a follow-up. But whatever the case is, this is the situation. Of course, Tlaib has a long history of attacking Israel. She has derided the country as an apartheid state back in May, saying that it was founded on ethnic cleansing. And she was at least the claims were rejected on Twitter, where users were quick to apply the community notes fact check feature. Permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, also told Fox News Digital that the comments were an example of the Democrats' anti-Semitic lies. So saying, quote, Tlaib's ignorance and hatred towards the Jewish people and the state of Israel know no bounds, Erdan said. The facts are clear. The Arabs rejected the UN's resolution to establish a Jewish state and started a war to annihilate the Jews in Israel. So that's the story there. Kudos again to McCarthy for standing by our allies and doing what, in my opinion, is the right thing. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis also chimed in on issues of immigration, just as Tlaib did, saying that no one is illegal. Well, DeSantis took a different route and says that he's going to take a very strong stance because nobody has a right to immigrate to this country, saying that, no foreigner, we as Americans determine what type of immigration system benefits our country. But when you're doing immigration, it's not for their benefit as foreigners. It's for your benefit as Americans. How do they contribute to the fabric of our country? So if there's a immigration system that's harming Americans, we shouldn't do it. And I think DeSantis is right when he says that. He goes on to say that in Florida, he's passing some very, very aggressive bill that is going to prevent illegal aliens from having a driver's license in Florida. It also prohibits county governments and nonprofit organizations from using any tax dollars to provide IDs for any illegal aliens. Listen to Cut 12, Ron DeSantis.
The bill also prohibits county governments and NGOs from using tax dollars to provide IDs for illegal aliens. It invalidates out-of-state licenses issued to illegal aliens, and it makes it a felony for illegal aliens to use a fake ID to gain employment. We don't have in Florida, and we shouldn't have, driver's licenses for illegal aliens. A lot of people across the country who want open borders, they want driver's licenses, and you have it I think in California and a number of these other states. We've never done that. But what happens is you have some of these local governments, they're actually working with private groups to generate ID cards to be able to be used as if that makes you legal to be here. So we're not going to recognize that. We're also not going to recognize a driver's license from California that was issued to somebody here illegally or these other states. And so we're making sure that in Florida we're doing it legal.
That's right. In Florida, they're doing it legal. So now, straight ahead, we're going to get a report from Chad Wolf, former Secretary of Homeland Security. He's going to join us live from the border. Don't go anywhere.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. And if you want to join this late-night National Town Hall conversation, feel free to do so. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. And I want to just recap a few things because we're talking about a lot, right? I mean, the Biden administration today announced that they're going to modify their approach and adopt some of Trump's strategy on asylum at the border in Mexico. Is it too little too late? I would say probably. There's also this ongoing saga and information that comes out of Congress with respect to criminality amongst all members, or at least most of the members of the Biden family, which we just had some discussion on and will continue throughout the evening. And the big story of the day is that Title 42 is going to end, the public health order that denied a lot of people entry to the country on the grounds of, the COVID emergency at the time. And with this ending, Biden himself yesterday mentions that there will likely be chaos for a little while. And, my response to that was, I think we've had chaos for a lot of while, like the entire time you've been president. But I want to get a bird's eye view of what's going on from somebody that's A, on the ground, and B, an expert. Chad Wolf is the former U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, and he's now the Executive Director and Chief Strategy Officer at America First Policy Institute. Chad Wolf, welcome to the program.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
You bet. So I want to start off with just so we're on the same page with some comments from Alejandro Mayorkas. We have a short clip of him today at the Title 42 press conference. Cut 6. Check this out.
Seeing the effectiveness of our approach, more than 100,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela have arrived lawfully through the pathway we have made available to them. And we reduced border encounters from these groups by 90% between December of last year and March of this year. Our president has led the largest expansion of lawful pathways ever. At the same time, we are clear-eyed about the challenges we are likely to face in the days and weeks ahead, which have the potential to be very difficult. Even after nearly 2 years of preparation, we expect to see large numbers of encounters at our southern border in the days and weeks after May 11th. We are already seeing high numbers of encounters in certain sectors.
Now, Mr. Secretary, listening to your successor here, I can't believe he's saying these words, but I'm thinking maybe it's just something I don't know. What say you?
Well, I think it's a big disinformation campaign that I think the department and the administration is trying to pull on the American people. If you just listen to a couple of things that he said, one, he's talking about 4 nationalities: Cubans, Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, and I believe maybe Colombians, if I have that right. He talks about those numbers going down. Those are just 4 countries. We have over 130 different nationalities and countries showing up along that border. And while he's been able to reduce the numbers for those 4 countries, the number of individuals still crossing the border every single month goes up. So he's not having the effect that you actually need to deter the illegal behavior. He's just simply shifting it. He talks about those legal pathways. The legal pathway that he's talking about is parole. He is abusing the parole program and the parole authority like none other. I think you only have to go back and you look at deferred action, the DACA program, which was instituted under President Obama, but also instituted by Secretary Mayorkas when he was at DHS. They have abused the deferred action authority within the immigration law to achieve a certain end that they couldn't do otherwise. And today they're abusing the parole authority, and they've already had a couple of court cases ruling against them. So he talks about these legal pathways that he and the president have created. They've abused immigration law And I think those legal pathways will come to an end because they're unlawful at the end of the day. So there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation kind of loaded in that statement. But this is what they do. They throw out big terms and terms that the American people don't quite understand, nor should they. And they try to tell you nothing to see here. Everything's fine. There's going to be a little chaos at the border. You are exactly right. There's been chaos at the border for 27 months. So I'm glad that now they start to recognize it and actually acknowledge it. But there is certainly more to come with the end of Title 42.
Now, part of me, Secretary Wolf, I feel like part of me is they're doing this because they can't hide it anymore, because there's this 700,000 people that are reportedly waiting down at the border for tomorrow. And I figure they have to kind of prime the pump and say, yeah, by the way, we're going to have a little chaos, but don't worry, it's going to be okay. And had it not been so bad that they could kind of cover it, or the media would provide the cover they needed, they would continue to misinform and allow people in. Now, the latest thing that I'm hearing is that they're going to be using this app to allow people to kind of decide where they want to go and jump on a bus without stopping anywhere. Am I oversimplifying that?
Well, they have rolled out what they call the CBP One app, and it allows individuals to get on the app, fill out some information, show up at a port of entry, and again, you get paroled into the country. Now, it's important. I'm spending a little time on the parole program because it's important, because what they're telling the American people and everyone else is that these individuals don't qualify for asylum, because once you're into the parole program, there is no avenue to then seek asylum. And the administration knows this, and yet they continue to enroll people in this parole program, because what it's telling you is they know that they make false asylum claims. They know this. They have the same data that I have. It's actually on their and they don't care. They're not trying to fix the fraud. They're not trying to solve the problem. And their outlook on this, and I think you have this right, is they want to process more people in, and they don't want to solve the problem.
All right. And I just want to reiterate that there's also other policies, and I'd love your reaction on it, where they're saying that if the border crossers that come in illegally, whether it's through asylum or whatever and what have you, they end up here and they get processed, and they go to these NGOs that help transport them through different parts of the country, that once they reach their capacity, that they're now going to allow them directly into the U.S., kind of with no NGO, with no escort. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. That's what happens when you overwhelm the system, and that's what's occurring at the moment. There's too many people to process, and so the Border Patrol doesn't have the time. They don't have the facilities to do that. So instead of filling out the paperwork, background checking these individuals, fingerprinting them, giving them the proper paperwork, telling them when there's a date to show up at a very specific office somewhere in the country, they're simply saying, I don't have time to do any of that. I'm just going to release you onto the streets. I'm going to give you a notice to report, which is very different than what they normally do. A notice to report says, I'm not sure where you're going, but wherever you go, show up to the nearest ICE office whenever you can.
Do me a favor, just show up, okay?
It's a joke. And guess what? People aren't showing up, but that's really not a surprise.
Unbelievable. Folks, we're on with the Homeland Security Secretary Emeritus, former acting U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf. He's the Executive Director and Chief Strategy Officer at the America First Policy Institute. And we're going to continue this discussion on Title 42 ending at midnight in just 44 minutes. And we're going to continue that discussion straight ahead. Plus your calls, 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Gary, going back from NBC News, you mentioned some of the immigration proceedings to Pedro. Are you prepared to start releasing migrants into the U.S. without court dates and without a way to track them to reduce overcrowding?
So when like other administrations, when we release individuals, we release them on conditions. And their compliance with those conditions is absolutely necessary. And if they fail to comply, we will seek to apprehend them and remove them. They are ultimately in immigration enforcement proceedings. But what we are speaking of, what you are inquiring of, is a fraction of the people that we encounter. In fact, the vast majority will be addressed in our Border Patrol facilities and our ICE detention facilities.
All right, that's, again, Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, DHS Secretary, and our guest is the previous Homeland Security Secretary, Chad Wolf. Chad Wolf, you just heard him. We just discussed this. Do you believe, in benefit of the doubt, any of that stuff, do you believe at all that there is capacity to track these people down like he's saying?
Well, absolutely not. And again, I think what Secretary Mayorkas is doing is not being upfront and transparent with the American people. He tells you just enough to think, that he wants to tell you. He doesn't actually tell you everything. Embedded in some of those comments were the fact where he says that, we will remove those individuals. That's simply not the case. Removals of illegal aliens have been at the very lowest that they have possibly ever been under this administration over the last 2 years. And so this idea that he's going to track them down and then remove them when he's told ICE law enforcement officials not to remove them, you can't have it both ways. You can't have record low removals and then tell the American people that we're going to remove them. It defies logic and it defies the reality. Facts are stubborn things. And the facts do not line up for the Secretary on this point and many others for that matter.
Now, Secretary Wolf, to your knowledge, there's this huge, and to mine, and I think most Americans, we all know, that the end of Title 42 marks what Biden's own words, chaotic, right? It's going to be chaotic for a little while. That's about to happen, at the clock hits midnight. Is Secretary Mayorkas on the ground at the border?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm currently in El Paso for the next couple of days. I'm not sure where the secretary is. I think he may have visited parts of Texas earlier this week, but I don't believe he's here on the ground now. And I think, an important part here is what happens after Title 42. And the amount of individuals that have been returned back to Mexico under Title 42 is about 50 to 60,000 a month. All of those individuals, likely, will be released into American communities over the next several days as Title 42 goes away. And so this idea that Secretary Mayorkas and the president have said it will be a chaotic situation, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way. It's almost like they are bystanders in this crisis, kind of admiring it and commenting on it. Someone needs to tell them they have the authority to stop the crisis. They need to stop admiring the problem, and they actually need to get to work in stopping it. And they have the
Now, I know you mentioned you're in South Texas, and I'm wondering, what are some of your plans while you're down there? What's some of the work that you're involved in?
Well, we've been talking to Border Patrol officials. We've been talking to ranchers and to farmers and to other Americans that are impacted by what's going on the border. I think if you listen to the president and you listen to the secretary, very few times, almost, I can't even remember the last time, that they actually talked about the crisis as it relates to Americans, what they are doing to protect American communities, American jobs. They don't talk about it in these terms. It's always about the illegal aliens. What's best for them? Well, how can they make their lives better? How can they process more of them into the country? And so that's what we are hearing from folks on the ground here in El Paso is they feel like the administration has forgotten about them, about their jobs, about their livelihoods, and about how all of this is impacting them. And they are frustrated about that.
All right. And again, folks, I just want to remind you, we're on with Chad Wolf. He's Executive Director and Chief Strategy Officer at the America First Policy Institute, former acting U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security. He's in South Texas, and the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, is not. Chad Wolf, if you were able to give some advice, if they were actually willing to listen and they weren't just engineering this chaos for their own benefit, what would you advise them to do?
I would advise them to stop encouraging illegal aliens to come to the border. Stop talking about all the different ways that you can process and make their lives easier to come here to the United States, because that is the most inhumane border policy that you can have. Because every time you do that, these individuals put their lives in the hands of cartel members, and it's a very violent journey. Whether you're talking about the parole system, whether you're talking about the processing centers that they're going to create south of the border, all these different things and everything that you hear the secretary say, it's all about ways to bring individuals into the country quicker and faster. And that's simply the wrong approach. It's time to solve the issue. It's time to stop admiring it. And to solve it means to bring it to an end and a conclusion. And that's what they need to be doing. And there's a variety of ways to do that, but it first starts with a change in mentality. So I think that's what I would tell them is the mentality is wrong, your approach is wrong, your strategy is wrong. It needs a reboot, and you need to start doing something different than what you've been doing the last 27 months.
In terms of physical security, the border is insecure. What would your recommendations be to immediately secure the border if you, again, were once in charge?
Sure, absolutely. I would announce immediate construction of additional border wall systems, additional miles. That sends a signal to a variety of different groups for a variety of different reasons. I would tell the government of Mexico that we're restarting the Remain in Mexico program in 60 days. I would restart asylum cooperative agreements. I would tell ICE agents that they can actually do their job. They can actually remove individuals who illegally cross the border. You can remove them from the country. The Biden administration has given them a very specific directive that simply crossing the border and breaking the law is not enough for you to do your job. You have to wait until they commit a violent act. I have no idea why this administration is waiting for individuals to harm Americans before we remove them when they have no legal right to be here. It just seems very backwards to me, and it's putting Americans last. So they need to start putting Americans first.
Is there a downside to applying pressure to Mexico so they can, in turn, leverage whatever relationship they have with the cartels to try and mitigate some of what's going on? Or is that useless?
Yeah, I don't think there's downside to it. I think we have a compromised partner with the government of Mexico and the current leadership there. So I think you got to be on about the realities of what that can be. But this administration has probably the worst relationship with the Mexican government than we've had in decades. And as a result of that, we're not getting a lot of cooperation from them. So that needs to change. But the Biden administration doesn't want to play hardball with them and doesn't want to use a variety of different levers that we have. Instead, they want to be, Mr. Nice Guy. And you can see that's just not getting us anywhere.
All right, Secretary Chad Wolf, I want to thank you for your time and for staying up late with us. Keep up the great work at the America First Policy Institute, and hope you'll come back soon and give us an update.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
You bet. All right, straight ahead, more to come. We're going to talk about China, what's going on internationally. Frank Gaffney scheduled to be with us. Don't go anywhere. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. Open phones coming up at the top of the next hour. All right, America, welcome back. We're going to get to your calls and more in a little bit. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ, and that's Valdez with an S. You can always chime in online on any of the social medias at Rich Valdez with an S. I'm happy to take a look at your comments there. And there's a U.S. government probe looking into whether a Rockwell automation operation in China might allow access to critical American government and industrial infrastructure. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. And, of course, we know China's always on the move with their unrestricted warfare, which seldom has to do with military might and often has to do with that, right? Getting in, spying, stealing, doing what they do best. And they're going to do more of it as, their lending, their banking system seems to be the repayments are not doing well with respect to new loans. So we're going to see how that continues to play out. But with us to talk about China and to tell us about his new book is Frank Gaffney. He's the executive chairman of the Center for Security Policy, vice chairman of the Committee on the Present Danger, China, and he's the host of Securing America with Frank Gaffney on Real America's Voice. Frank Gaffney, welcome to the program, sir.
Rick, it's terrific to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So let us embark on our discussion with China, because I never have anything good to say about China. I'm a little bit of sour on them all the time. Is there a good reason to think that China could ever be a trusted ally, a trusted partner, or just somebody that's just not an active adversary or enemy?
Well, I think there is, provided that it gets a new government. The Chinese Communist Party is the thing that stands in the way of that, of course. And this new book, and thank you for mentioning it, the indictment, we call it, is about not only the danger that Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, represents to the people of China, but to us and, well, the world more generally, and why and how we can go about trying to counter them and ultimately, hopefully, bring them down. Because, if you want to look at what could be if China were free of this totalitarian, brutally repressive, indeed genocidal regime. It's killed 100 million of its own people by some estimates, and that doesn't even take into account for maybe 500 million others that have been killed as babies in the womb. There's never been anything like it in terms of monstrous repression, as you know, Rick. But the thing is, if you want to see what things might look like were China actually free of the CCP, look no further than Taiwan. And that's why they're determined, I'm afraid, through force of arms, if necessary, to bring down the free republic in Taiwan. And we should be doing everything we can to prevent that from happening.
Now, with respect to the comments you just made, you said that, perhaps if we got rid of the Chinese Communist Party, this is a good start, I suppose. You also talk about the crimes against America, and we know about some of the crimes against China. I mean, I remember the news reports surrounding Tiananmen Square, which was a massacre, and I think that again at the time it was a flash in the pan as far as I can remember. I was a little kid, but I remember it not being a huge deal, and only as an adult did I really understand the severity of it. And what are some of China's crimes against America?
May I just say one thing about Tiananmen? The reason it was a blip is because immediately after the Chinese Communist Party murdered easily tens of thousands of people, probably many, many more, the students in Tiananmen Square, of course, most obviously, but across the country, in fact. President George H.W. Bush sent his national security advisor to China to say, we weren't going to let that interfere with business as usual. It was going to be, no problem as far as we were concerned. And then as a result, it became something that sort of slipped from the public consciousness instead of being just a prime example of the horrors of this thing. And why this matters so much, why we've got this as the first charged in this indictment, Rick, is that's what they would do to us if they can get their hands on us. What they've done to their own people, and probably worse. But to your question about what they've done to us already, and you mentioned, and I'm so glad you are aware of it and talking to your audience about it, this practice of unrestricted warfare, and that's the term the Chinese communists themselves use, has brought unbelievable damage to our country. And we've developed 8 different charges in this book related to what we call war crimes that they've engaged in, because it's warfare, yes, but we think, and this is a page out of my old boss Ronald Reagan's playbook, by the way to think about this operation is not as a political party or even as a legitimate government of China. It is a transnational criminal organization. So when it engages in warfare, they're actually war crimes. And we recommend that they be prosecuted for 8 of them in the court of public opinion. And I can go through some of them if you'd like.
We will straight ahead. First, I want to take a quick pause here. Remind everybody that we're on with Frank Gaffney, former Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Forces and Arms Control Policy at the Department of Defense during the Reagan years. And we're talking about his book, The Indictment, Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World. Make sure you pick up a copy. I always say pick up 2, one for yourself, one for a friend. And we're going to do that as well as your calls. If you have questions on China for Frank Gaffney, the phone number 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And we're going to get to your calls and more momentarily, 833-4-VALDEZ. But right now we're on with Frank Gaffney. He is the head of the Center for Security Policy, right? Did I get that right? I hope I did. And he has a brand new book, a fantastic book, The Indictment, Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World. Make sure you pick up a couple of copies of that. Now, Frank Gaffney, we left off with you bringing us up to speed on a couple of examples of China's unrestricted warfare here in the United States.
Yeah, as I said, there are 8 charges as how we've sort of structured it. And may I just say, first of all, I said Rick, and I apologize for that. Rich, we've used as sort of the wellspring for this book 70 plus webinars that our Committee on the Present Danger China has conducted over the past 10 months or so. And they're all available for free online if people want to do a deeper dive. And by the way, in the book, there's a QR code for each of them that allow you to, go to the videotape, as they say. But just to give you a couple of examples, I would argue that the single most insidious form of this unrestricted warfare, we call it, influence operations. They have an entire department devoted to it called the United Front Work Department. And the Chinese term for it is elite capture. And in our book's subtitle, as you've been kind enough to mention, we're talking about prosecuting not just the Chinese Communist Party, but its friends. And by that, we mean leaders in our own country, starting most obviously with the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military, President Joe Biden. Many in his cabinet and sub-cabinet administration positions, many in Congress, but also governors in some cases, state legislators, and the like. It's been a target of political influence, but it's also their unrestricted warfare influence operations have gone after capturing leaders of the financial sector in our country, which is transferred by some measures between $3 and $6 trillion of our money, our pension funds, our mutual funds, our investments of other kinds, to the Chinese communists. And then there's others in business leadership positions and academia and the media and Hollywood and, when you put it all together, sports and culture and so on, you put it all together, and it is not a mystery why so few of us even know that this war has been going on for decades against us, let alone the damage it's done. And let me just give you one prime example of this. There's a phenomenon, as you know, called the Rust Belt in America. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is the heart of the Rust Belt. When I was a kid, we produced steel in copious quantities there. No more. The Rust Belt is a direct result of the Chinese Communist Party's economic warfare against our country, designed to destroy its industrial base, to make us dependent upon them for steel and medicine and flat screens and lithium-ion batteries and windmills and any number of other things. And the last couple of things I mentioned there go to the heart of the energy warfare the Chinese have been waging on us. You know, they've talked a good game about their commitment to climate change. They're producing coal-fired power plants every day practically. They don't give a fig about the environment, let alone climate change. They just want to use it as a means of stripping us of our fossil fuel energy security and make us dependent upon them for things like, as I say, batteries and wind turbines and so on. This is all part of a grand strategy that they've been pursuing, as I mentioned, for decades. Now, unfortunately, we fear they're at a point where they are prepared to add to the mix the old-fashioned kind of warfare, the shooting kind.
Now, do you really? I know they've been building up their military, and they've shown some aggression, in particular Taiwan and in the South China Sea with their little fake islands and whatnot. But I don't get the sense. Again, you'd know way better than me. But I don't get the sense that they want that fight with the United States, at least not now. Or do you think they're ready for it and they're looking for it?
It's a great question, and I think the answer to it is this. There is a tradition going back millennia to Sun Tzu, the famous Chinese strategist, that is preferable to win without fighting. Right. Win without fighting, the art of war, exactly. And yet, I think Xi Jinping is a monomaniacal kind of character, seeking to have a stature in China and in the world's history that rivals, in fact, surpasses that of Mao Zedong. And I think his belief is that he has now achieved the Soviets used to call it a correlation of forces that would allow him to win decisively a war against the United States as well as Taiwan and other allies. And that he has his own domestic internal reasons for wanting to engage in it. That you know, as you mentioned, I think in your lead-in, there's a banking crisis, there's a real estate crisis, there's a demographic crisis, there's all kinds of turbulence inside his own country. Tyrants have often, as you know, I'm sure, relied upon external threats, even manufactured ones, to justify intensified repression at home and divert their, people's attention elsewhere rather than at the regime. So I think all of these things are adding up. And the tell, as we talk about in the indictment at length, is the growing evidence of the preparations for war. And by the way, not just in terms of building up a military, that is our rival. At best, at worst, it is surpassing us in important respects, but also the preparations for the people to accept still greater hardship and sacrifice and privation. I think that's what that whole COVID lockdown business was about in China, was preparing them for what will be entailed if a war does, in fact, break out between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party.
Folks, we're on with Frank Gaffney. He's the chairman of the Center for Security Policy, and we've been talking about China. Frank Gaffney, I know your foreign affairs is your forte, but I want to switch gears to some domestic policy because it involves the late, as Limbaugh called him, Ronaldus Magnus, the late great President Ronald Reagan, and we're going to do that straight ahead right after this.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We're on with Frank Gaffney. former Reagan DOD official and chairman at the Center for Security Policy. He's also got a TV show, Securing America with Frank Gaffney, and he's the author of a brand new book that you got to get, The Indictment, Prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World. That came out just yesterday. Make sure you pick up 2 copies, one for yourself, one for a friend. Now, Frank Gaffney, you're a former Reagan official, and just so happens, by happenstance here, that the California Reparations Committee is demanding that the state apologize for then Governor Reagan's term of welfare queen. And the state task force is now calling on the legislature, the governor, and to issue an apology for slavery and for anti-black discrimination. How do you respond to that? And what do you think the Gipper would say?
Oh, I think the Gipper would probably say, this is right out of the playbook of the communists. You know, Mao, I mentioned earlier, Rich, was a specialist in fracturing his opposition. He would set people against one another, and out of the chaos, he would find it easier to dominate and control them. And what the communists, including the Maoists, by the way, including their allies, their friends, as we've talked about, in our own country, are carrying this out. The Reparations Commission and this whole idea that people who had nothing to do with slavery in a state that was free, it was not a slave state, by the way, owe reparations to people who generations before may or may not actually have had a relative who had anything to do with slavery, is a prime example of the Maoist sort of cultural Marxism in our midst. And I think Reagan would have laid it bare and have taken it on, not capitulated to it, which an awful lot of politicians in California, where I am at the moment, by the way, in our time are doing. And it's one of these things that I think we've allowed ourselves to be bullied. We've allowed ourselves to be forced into submission to all of this. And I think it goes a long way to explaining the kinds of real problems we have in America today. Needless, avoidable, ones that we can't sustain, honestly. It's a credit, in a way, to the Chinese Communist Party and their allies that they've put us in this kind of condition, and we've got to get out of it. And we have, by the way, in that indictment of ours, 20 different action items that we recommend to counter what they've been doing to us and what they have in mind doing to us in the future, by the way. And we've got to get about right quick adopting and implementing these action items, I think.
All right, folks, Frank Gaffney's our guest, and the book is The Indictment. Pick up a couple of copies. Frank Gaffney, let everybody know how they can follow the work that you're doing and all of the wonderful things you're involved with.
Well, thank you. As I mentioned, one is the Committee on the Present Danger of China, which really was seminal in putting this book together, presentdangerchina.org. Our Center for Security Policy site is securefreedom.org, and you can follow my show at securingamerica.tv. Thanks so much, Rich.
Outstanding. You bet. Thank you for being with us. And, folks, straight ahead, we're going to get into your calls and more. 833-4-VALDEZ. Open Phone America is straight ahead. Don't go anywhere. Don't move a muscle. Open Phone America starts right now.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo, and it's my pleasure to be with you this evening. Our telephone number, if you want to join the late-night town hall conversation, let your voice be heard, 833-482-5337, 8334. Valdez is the phone number, and of course, we're at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Now, let's dig right in because there's a lot of things to talk about. As you know, the kind of format of the show, the way we do it is we try to hit you with the hard news in the first hour of the program. And then the second hour of the program, we try to get to some philosophical stuff and maybe some lifestyle stuff. And of course, in the third hour of the program, we try to get to as many of your calls as possible. So now is the time to call in. I know sometimes we have this rush of calls at 48 minutes into the hour. And there's only 10 minutes left in the show, and we're not able to get it to everybody when you call in that late. So call in up front early, and we'll get to your calls as soon as we can. It's the best way to be able to get on the show. Now, there's been over 20,000 illegal border crossers just in the last 2 days. Title 42 is set to expire right now, and they're expected to release illegal immigrants into the streets once the facilities hit capacity and the nonprofits that are handling the busing hit their capacity. And that's all they're going to do. They're just going to release them into the interior of the country. And Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, he says, well, there's protocols in place. There are things that they have to do. We fully expect them to cooperate, but they're going to be released without a court date, without an ankle bracelet, without anything other than saying, hey, look, now listen, we're letting you go now. You came in here, you violated the law, but we're going to have to bring you to court, and you better show up, okay? And that's it. They're getting that stern talking to. So that's what's going on with that. Then the FBI refuses to hand over the file of the informant that says that while he was an FBI informant, he has proof that Joe Biden took 2 bribes. And the FBI is now stonewalling, saying, no, we can't give you that information, blah, 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 blah. That's that. Then there's Congressman George Santos. Now, you may remember him. Congressman Santos is someone who I've met on a number of occasions. He's a New York Republican, and he is now facing federal charges. I honestly haven't even seen what these federal charges are yet, but I know he was seen going into court today. Let's see what we got here. He's famous, obviously, for lying and whatnot. There was 13 counts in his criminal indictment, and the prosecutors say that the deceit and this web of fraud overlapped with his false and fantastic public image as a wealthy businessman. And this fictional biography that he created for himself is now falling apart. So I'm looking at the indictment here, but it's a lot to go through. But there's ethics charges that are involved here. Let's see what else they outline here. Let me see. Was the sole... Okay, so now they're saying that these companies that he's created were, in fact, schemes to defraud the public and whatnot. So I'll look into this a little more. But basically, that's the gist of it. And all I could say is this. And George Santos, if you're listening, I want to cut. Listen to this. I believe that this is one of the most amazing stories. Not a good one, but this is going to make a fantastic movie about a guy who was, a kid in Brazil, dressed up as a drag queen, comes to America. I could imagine the title of this being An American Dream, the George Santos story. Right? Just imagine that. A Brazilian drag queen, not full-time drag queen, but part-time drag queen, and comes to the United States, struggles, does what he's got to do, becomes a actual rock star, gets elected to Congress, all of that, then only to be caught in his web of lies, charged with wire fraud, 3 counts of money laundering, 1 count of theft of public funds, and more. I mean, it's out there. This is quite the story. I mean, we've seen other stories of famous con men. I think this is a great story. That's going to be a fantastic movie. And if there is a cameo at all in any part where he's on with Rich Valdez, because I've interviewed him a couple of times, I would love to play the part of Rich Valdez for any of the producers and directors that are out there looking to make those casting decisions. Anyway, I want to get to your calls on all the topics that we've discussed tonight. Let's see what we have out there. Let's go to Ann in Fort Worth, Texas, KLIF. Go right ahead, Ann. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Good evening. Well, thank you. I was very interested in what Frank Gaffney was saying, and I agree with him wholeheartedly. But I think it's only a piece of what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's a very precise piece, but it's only a piece of it. I think our current administration and all of the cohorts that are involved in it, they have been, for many, many years, for probably decades, grooming us, training us to the point we're at right now. But now they are going even further. They are trying to destroy and control our food supplies. They're trying to destroy small banks so that everything goes through 3 or 4 large banks. Part of what they did with the pandemic by mandating and controlling us was teaching us to obey orders. They want our kids now at age 3 so they can start training them. They want us in EV, so we are limited in how much we can travel. They want our war equipment now made into EVs so that they are very limited in what they can do. There's just no stop. There's no stopping what they're in the process of trying to do to the people of the United States in trying to put us in a position where they have total control of all of us, and then the elite can just sit up in their skyboxes and watch us all like the Hunger Games.
You know, and the other side of that coin, even if it wasn't that crazy, and I don't disagree with you, I think you're definitely on the right track, is that while they may not be trying to control us, they're definitely adding more power to themselves and giving us less options and, putting the stranglehold on our liberty. You know, the fact that it's no question more difficult to travel from New York City to Los Angeles in an electric vehicle than it is in a gas-powered vehicle, because the facility of getting gas is that much easier than finding charging stations. Now, I'm sure somebody's going to say, no, because, if you're Tesla, it brings you to exactly where you are. It brings you to exactly, what you're doing and blah, blah, blah. I disagree. I would say that I think you're right. This is totally, every step of the way, this limits one's liberty. And that's what should be our focus. I don't know that they all want to control us, but obviously that's the goal of authoritarians and totalitarians. This is what they live for. So whether we put it mildly or we put it harshly, either way, not good for we the people and very good for those in the ruling class. So I agree with you. While they're up in their skybox, this is not good for us. And I think the alternative is for the people to, really get it in gear and say, you know what, enough is enough, ya basta, like they say in Spanish, and really take the bull by the horns here and start rejecting these policies and this way of life. But lamentably, what we have is a bunch of people that have bought into it, that believe in the climate hysteria, that believe that this is the way to go, that we need, more and more electric cars, and let's dye our hair all sorts of colors and, join this bandwagon and sound like AOC all out crazy. And it's not good for America. It's not good for the future of our country. And it's not good for any of us that are, that have to live today and they're seeking liberty, Ann. All right. I guess we lost Ann. Oh, there she is. Well, thank you, Ann. I appreciate your call. We're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right. Well, welcome back. And quick story here that I want to share with you. I mean, we know Title 42. We know about the Biden criminality. There's a whole bunch of craziness going on. We're going to get to your calls and more. 833-4-VALDEZ is the phone number. But I want to get with this story very quickly, which is regarding a substitute teacher. Yep. This is crazy. So a substitute teacher is in a classroom, and a seventh grader is, going on about how they want to try a vaping pen. And a substitute teacher in Lake County, Florida, is now facing child abuse charges after investigators say she let a seventh grader take a hit from her vape pen. Jennifer Hale was arrested after it happened last week at Eustis Middle School. According to the police report, it happened in the last period of the day. It says the substitute teacher heard the seventh grader talking about his friend wanting to vape and gave him hers to take a hit. Jennifer Hunter's a mom to an eighth grader at Eustis Middle School, saying, quote, "Teachers, it's scary now. I've never thought that a substitute teacher would give my child or someone else's child any of that stuff. Just the other students." Now, according to the police report from the Eustis Police Department, a seventh grader said a substitute teacher named Jennifer heard his friend say that he wanted to vape, and she said, "Oh, I have one," and pulled it out. The seventh grader says that she then asked if he wanted a hit and told him not to report it. "You can't do this. You can't do it," Police Chief Craig Capri says. "This should be common sense." Yeah, duh. Eustis police say Hale is facing child abuse charges. She has a responsibility to that classroom to protect kids, not abuse them, Capri said. According to the report, when the principal confronted Hale about what happened, she admitted to it and was escorted off campus and told not to return. Capri says the reason she gave for doing it was surprising. "We contacted her immediately, and after reading her rights, and she confessed to doing it, her response was that she just wanted to fit in. I don't get it. Where is there to fit in? You're here to teach a class, not to fit in," is what the chief said. Thank God for a chief with some sense. And the mom feels the same way, saying that they don't need to fit in with kids at all. She said they just need to be more parent-like than fitting in with the kids. The Lake County School District said Hale is no longer employed with the district. They said she started substitute teaching for the district in November of last year and had no prior disciplinary issues. She was released on a $1,000 bond. Now, I'm sure there's some people listening to this going, come on, who cares, right? They took a little hit of the vape pen, and I don't know if this is one of those vape pens like the Juul or if it's like one of those vape pens that has like weed in it. Either way, I don't think this is appropriate, right? I mean, if a teacher had a cigarette or a joint, whichever one, and, they were like, man, I was just thinking of, hitting a J after school or, smoking a stogie. Oh, I've got one. Here, try mine. I mean, who does that? That's absolute insanity. I think the whole thing is nuts personally. Anyway, give us a call if you'd like to join the conversation. 833-4-VALDEZ, 833-482-5337. Let us go to Alex, Brooklyn, New York. Go right ahead.
Hey, thanks so much for taking the call, Rich. By the way,
Sir.
About this teacher, I agree with you. It's inappropriate, but I don't think she should have been arrested. I think that's a little bit too far. You say she didn't have any prior record of doing anything bad. I don't think there were any bad intentions involved with this, unless it had weed. That would be a different story, because that would be, that could be damaging for life if he gets addicted to weed or something like that. And also the George Santos thing, which you brought up.
Yeah.
I think that a movie should come out about it, because as it is now, it's a reality TV show. With everything that he's doing, I mean, you just saw him bringing out food to the reporters in front of his office while they were waiting. This guy is a clown. I don't know. I kind of like him. I think he's crazy, but I think that in the court he should have pleaded guilty today. He pleaded not guilty, but if he would have pleaded guilty, they might have believed that he's not guilty of the charges because he lies so much.
Right. Well, yeah, you're right. I think the guy's he's a very talented con man, and I'm curious to see how this ends up. I think if he in fact gets convicted and goes to jail, he's definitely going to have a movie deal.
And if they do a movie, they should also do an investigation. And would he have been able to get into a position of being a congressman without all these lies and fabricating all these things? Because he said that a lot of the lies that he said was because he didn't think he would be able to make it otherwise. So I would like to see if there would be a possibility for him to become a congressman without all the shenanigans. But also about the border, I think that Republicans overall, they mentioned the cocaine and the fentanyl issue and the criminals that are coming across, but I see that the focus is mostly on that we have a border, and a country without walls is not a country, and if the border isn't secure, it's a problem, and all these people coming across here, a lot of them are bad people. I think that's the wrong focus if we want to get Democrats on our side of the aisle. In fact, tonight Donald Trump had his town hall with CNN. I'm sure you saw some of it, and he was focused on this, that they just shouldn't come here. It's a problem that they're coming, and all these people, we got to shut down the border. And I was hoping that he would bring up, because there they had a lot of Democratic voters that were watching that. I was hoping that he would bring up the cocaine and the fentanyl crisis, because the way I see it, and I think the way to persuade Democrats would be to say, yes, we feel bad for the people that are stuck in Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, and we should be allowing them in here, but not at the expense of where we're sacrificing our safety and the safety of our children and our lives. And that's what we're having with this border wall being open, because of all the cocaine that came across of it. And it's because the border is open, and we have 4 million gotaways. I think so many of these gotaways are criminals, because if they weren't criminals, they would turn themselves in, because you get a free smartphone, Xbox, housing, food. And the only reason why you wouldn't want to turn yourself in is if you're a criminal and you're afraid of getting either sent back to Mexico or put in jail here in the United States if they do a check on you. So
100%, Alex. Let me just jump in and say that I think you're totally right. When you have someone that's coming into the country and is saying, no, I don't want any of the handouts, I don't want any of the medical, I don't want any of anything, I don't want anything, I'm just going to abscond from here on out. Clearly, to me, this sends a huge red flag, right? This isn't, hey, I want to be here and be on the books and become a part of the fabric of your society, or I want to get a job and I want to do this, or I wouldn't even want to be a freeloader. This is, I just want to get out of here and I don't want anybody listening to me. Anyway, Alex, thank you for the call from WFAS in New York City. Thank you very much, brother. We're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead. We've got a full call board. One line just opened up if you want to try it, 833-482-5537. More after this.
Radio 6 years in a row. It's Rich Valdez.
If I'm president, I will have that war settled in one day, 24 hours.
How would you settle that war in one day?
Because I'll meet with Putin, I'll meet with Zelensky. They both have weaknesses and they both have strengths. And within 24 hours, that war will be settled. It'll be over.
That sounds like a leader to me. Because you know what? I also believe that. Not just about him and the war, about anything. I think Biden, if Biden had a brass set and said, hey, listen, President AMLO, I got to talk to you. Here's what we're going to do. If you want to continue to have trade in our country, if you want anything coming into this country, you want anything to do with the United States, your neighbor, you can either have a good relationship with your neighbor or a really bad one. And if you ever had a bad neighbor, it's a horrible thing. Let's work together. And I would put him under pressure. And I would just let them know, here's what we're going to do. We're going to mess you up. We're going to mess you up. I mean, talking about embargoes, like the way you can't go to Cuba, can't go to Cancun, can't go to Mexico, can't do anything. I'd shut it down. I'd hit him where it hurts, and get him to soften up and take a more hardline approach with the cartel. You know, and I would make a veiled threat about using the military and attacking narco-terrorists and classifying them as narco-terrorists and saying, look, I'm going to blow a bunch of stuff up at the southern border. Not you. The terrorists that are, in your country. You don't have a problem with us taking on the terrorists, do you? And letting them know we're going to wreak havoc there. Or you could do it. You know, one of us is going to do it. But he doesn't do anything like that. Instead, he's making his guy, Merrick Garland, tell the Ukrainians, hey, did you guys need more money? Great. We froze some assets from the Russians. We're going to take it away from the Russians, and instead we're going to be giving it to the Ukrainians. And that's the story right now. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has okayed the transfer of forfeited funds from Russia, the oligarchs, and we're going to be using that in Ukraine. So it's a modern-day money laundering scheme, and the U.S. and Merrick Garland are the money launderers. Fascinating. Literally. I'm not trying to defend Putin. The last thing I am is a pro-Putin patriot. But this just doesn't sound right? It just doesn't sound right. But maybe it is. Maybe that's exactly what we should be doing. I don't know. What say you? Let me know. 833-4-VALDEZ. 833, the number 4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Doc in Wilmington, Delaware. WDEL. Doc, go right ahead.
Let me preface my comments by saying I'm a fan of yours all the way alive. Always have been, always will be.
Thank
since
you, brother.
WPHT years ago. That's number
Yes,
one.
sir.
Number two, I'm a Trumpster. I'm going to vote for the guy no matter what. I'm in his corner. But I think he's wrong about Ukraine. Here's why. Number one, it's a money laundering scheme, as you said right now, for the Bidens, the Democratic Party. That's wrong. Our policy towards Ukraine is wrong. We should give them weapons but not money, and we shouldn't have frozen Russian assets. That's an act of war. That's my view of that policy. Having said that, if President Trump says I would end the war in one day, no way that war is going to end in one day is if we cede Ukrainian territory to Putin, and that cannot be done. Simply cannot be done. Then we're appeasing a dictator. So Trump, in that regard, sounds less presidential to me than it is other pronouncements. What do you say, Rich? What say you?
Yeah, well, Doc, I do believe, there's a few things he said in that clip that I think are accurate. He said Ukraine has weaknesses and Russia has weaknesses. He adds that they both have strengths, and that's just to be respectful and fair as a negotiating tool. But I think what he's saying there between the lines is he knows both of their weaknesses, and he'll play each weakness against the other. And again, you can do that when you're president of the United States. You can turn to Zelensky and say, cut the crap with whatever it is you're trying to do, blah, blah, blah. Listen, the deal I present to you, you got to take. You got to take the deal that's coming your way because it's the only deal that exists. This is your only off-ramp here, right? That's the pressure for them. I think on the other side, he turns to them and says, look, enough is enough. I'm not gonna sit here and allow this thing to go on and on and on and on and on. You're towing the line of starting a war with NATO, right? It's eventually the next step is what it's going to be, right? He's stealing Ukraine, and every day inching closer and closer, in my opinion, to doing something that is going to be considered an act of war against one of the NATO allies. And you do it to one, you've done it to all. That's the deal. So now Putin doesn't want a war with NATO. He can't win a war with NATO because he can't even win a war with Ukraine. So I think in those certain terms, if I were Trump, that's what I would say. I'd say, listen, bro, all due respect to you, you're not winning. You're not winning, and that's Joe Biden that's helping Ukraine. Just imagine if I were to get involved. Is that what you want? And if you want me to get involved, say the word. Trust me, you're going to lose. Trust me. And I think once you put Putin in that situation, only one of two things happens. Either we destroy Russia or he plays ball. And now we have a conversation and we're negotiating. So I don't think we'll be ceding any more territory. I mean, there'll be a lot of negotiating over, what they've stolen so far with Crimea and how that works out. And, this will be a temporary fix. There'll be a diplomatic solution. Similar, I guess, in many ways to what happened with the, the Balfour Accords, where, there's still debate over that today, and a lot of people are displeased with that. But it is what it is. The nation of Israel exists because of those Balfour Accords, and while there's conflict, there is a place for the Jewish state. There is a place for the Palestinians, and although, truth be told, there's debate on where one starts and one finishes, they do exist. And I think that's probably what we would see with Ukraine and Russia, and hopefully a better solution than the one that, the very rough example I just ironed out. But that's what I think, in essence, would happen, Doc. Thank you for your call, my brother. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you always listening since back in the day. Let us continue. Let's go to Sue in Schwenksville, Pennsylvania, WXDE. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Well, it's been a great show tonight. You just hit it out of the park with every topic and every guest. It was just awesome.
You're too kind. Thank you.
That's true. I mean, I'm just sitting here, how do I limit my comments? Like your first caller, Ann, was right on the money. And your comments to her, here's my thinking. And I don't know. I just want to see what your opinion is. What benefit does the government have out of creating the chaos that this, Title 42, this tidal wave that we're going to be getting? We're already getting so many millions of them in here. And with this tidal wave that we're going to be getting, I'm wondering if there is a potential for them declaring martial law or something like that in order to complete their dominion over the population. They got so addicted to power from the pandemic and everything. And we've got crime in the streets now. People are busy, preoccupied, trying to make a living and keep food on the table. So they're not fighting back because they're trying to keep, their heads above water. So what do you think the potential is for something like martial law? And is there a precedent for that?
I don't think there is any potential for it. And I know that sounds odd, but here's the thing, right? I just look at history to do the analysis. The Democrats, the left, the more liberal side of our government, they never want to look heavy-handed. Maybe Gavin Newsom in California and Gretchen Whitmer, but those are, some real extreme examples. But for the most part, it's always, no, take it easy. No, calm down. It's always platitudes. They always want to rob you while showing you that their hands are completely empty. And, some third hand is coming around the back and stealing your wallet. This is literally how they always do it. They always use that type of subversion, if you will. It's never direct. It's always covert, not overt. So I don't think that would happen. I think what they're trying to do is normalize the chaos, right? The Cloward-Piven model, that strategy of overwhelming the system to break the system. And I had this conversation a little bit earlier today with somebody that was explaining and saying, you know what? Things are slowly eroding everywhere. All sorts of systems and norms are going away. For example, my big girl, she's going to be getting out of college soon. And I remember applying to college with her. And there was one of the things they make you do, whether it was the FAFSA or the state aid one, I remember clicking. It said, if you're a citizen, click here. And if you identify as a dreamer or undocumented, click here. And I thought the wording was unique, identify as blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is such a crock. But I clicked on the other one, right? Not the citizen one, the dreamer one. And it brought me to a page where it said, it was basically the end of the application. It said, okay, great. Here's what you get. You qualify for in-state tuition. You may qualify for other types of aid or scholarship or blah, 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 based on your situation and need and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, wow, that's simple, and, great for those kids that are here and maybe going through the unfortunate circumstances of being in this country and being dragged across the border or whatever it was, how they ended up here. But interesting how it affects a kid like mine that's a United States citizen that was born here to parents who were born here. So, I go back, I click out of it, and I go back and I click U.S. citizen. And when I clicked the U.S., there was another 40 or 50 questions. How much does your dad make? How much does your mom make? How much is this? What's that? What's that? What's that? And I think I got, I don't know, $2,000 worth of aid or whatever, in some type of, I don't even know if it's a scholarship, but just some sort of package they put together. And I thought to myself, wow, just so interesting how, had I lied and been like, no, we identify as dreamers, we would have gotten a better deal on school for my kid. And the point of this story was that they're making it easier and better for things to be worth the effort. So people that used to say, I came to this country, and when I came to this country, you had to have a sponsor. When we were immigrants, we had to make sure that we worked. We had to guarantee that we had a place to live. We had to make sure that somebody was going to take care of us, that we weren't going to be a drag on the system. I meet a million immigrants all the time, tons of them, and they all have that story. They all say, you know what, look, I had to wait online. You should wait online too. Italian immigrants, Irish immigrants, Mexican immigrants, you name it, Brazilian immigrants. I've met so many from all over the place. So then why is it that we're having the issue we have? If everybody, even the immigrants, feel that way, legal immigrants. Well, I think it's because, again, they're trying to change the system overall, where it's not worth doing things the right way. It's easier to go shopping with a garbage bag at your local convenience chain pharmacy and throw everything in the garbage bag and just steal it than it is to get a job and buy it and do the right thing. It's easier to just say you're a dreamer or become a dreamer and go to college for a lot less than it is to be born here and have to pay the higher price because your parents have had some benefit of employment or whatever. And I just think as that continues and continues and continues, we're going to see more and more people that are going to take the easy way out because the government is literally creating an incentive for doing it the wrong way. And I think that is what's happening for whatever reason, whether they want to add more people. I think ultimately it's political. If they can add more people to districts, and I think Mark Morgan brought this up when he was on earlier this week, ultimately, if there's more people in each district, those districts get more money. And if you control which districts they go to, those congressional districts can have more power. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, Sue. I have to go because they're yelling at me in my ear, but excellent call, and I appreciate you calling from WXDE. We'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, we've got several calls and fewer minutes, so we're going to go quickly through these. Sam in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, KDKA, you're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Yeah, how you doing, Rich?
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that the promotion of electric vehicles somehow is limiting your ability to move. Is that what you mentioned earlier?
I said it'd be easier to drive to California in a gas-powered vehicle than an electric vehicle.
Yes, and then you said something about the government is somehow limiting your ability to move, or somehow your
ultimately, policies like this and others, I believe, limit liberty.
How so?
Well, can't get into all that now. You had to be paying attention earlier, but that was one example. If you force me to not drive a gasoline-powered vehicle and force me to have an electric vehicle and pay more for it and then give me a subsidy and then I have to stop and charge it every so often, that in and of itself limits how free I am to go where I want, when I want, and how I want.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be great if the American government would provide electric vehicles for everybody in the country. I mean,
I would not want that because that would cost a fortune. I'd prefer they leave me alone and not tell me what to do and how to do and where to do.
We subsidize oil companies in a fortune on a yearly basis. Why couldn't we just use that money and use it for electric vehicles for Americans?
Well, maybe you should run for office and make that suggestion. I don't think we should subsidize oil companies. I don't think we should subsidize EV. I don't think we should subsidize anything. I don't think the government should be in the subsidy business. And this is why I typically vote for conservatives, because they usually agree with me that we shouldn't be in this tax and spend mentality. We should be in the thinking of making the size of government smaller, reducing the amount of tax that we take in so that they could use whatever tax revenues they have more sparingly. And we don't have these debates like raising the debt limit and then conflating that with paying our bills on time. But ultimately, that's the drug that everybody's hooked on in Washington. So the drug I'm hooked on is the Constitution and the liberty that it allows me, and anything that gets in the way, I'm not a fan of. Thanks for your call, Sam. I appreciate it. We're going to take a break right here because they're in my ear again, but we're going to get to a couple of more of your calls, and then we're going to wrap it up. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Jerry in Highland Park, Illinois, listening on WGN. Go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hi, Rich. Yeah, we don't get to hear you until it's a replay. I just thought I'd call and see if I could make it in.
Welcome.
I was told I got to be short. So about yesterday's verdict, I can't believe that happened. I've talked to some people, and they just it's turning them off. I think Trump doesn't have a choice now. I really think he should give a sample of his DNA and prove that he didn't do it. I mean, you know.
Well, you know, what would be interesting is would the court even ask if that happened? What's interesting here is the court didn't even ask for that. The court actually said he was not guilty of rape. So, I mean, I think he's had his day in court. They declared that he was not guilty on rape. They said battery and defamation is what they're, you know, if you read the opinion from the judge, they all but say that they don't believe that her case is credible and that it can happen, and that they're saying that the battery is somehow related to the defamation, saying that he did not rape her and that in and of itself was defaming her, which is just totally crazy in my opinion. And then they just wanted to, I guess, squeeze some money out of him. But, you know, thank God we don't live in a country where you have to prove your innocence, ahead of time, right? It's innocent until proven guilty. God bless America. Thanks for the call, Jerry. I appreciate it. Andrew in Sebring, Florida, WWTK. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich, I didn't hear the whole story about the teacher and the smoking, but it took me back to being in the 6th grade. And I think I'd like to apologize to Mrs. Sparks for telling on her when I caught her in the classroom bathroom smoking her cigarette.
And what happened to her? Did she get in trouble?
Oh, yeah. She sure did, poor dear. And I really felt bad about it afterwards because my father was a cigarette smoker. Everybody around me was cigarettes, but it just really freaked me out. I was like, wow, she's in the bathroom smoking. Holy cow. And it just
now,
spread like wildfire.
Did she give you a drag? Did you take a little puff with her?
I probably would have if she did.
Had she offered, hey, I've got one right here. Oh, that's funny, Andrew. Well, I appreciate it. The call from WWTK, Sebring, Florida, and everybody that's out there listening tonight. We got Daniel in Pittsburgh and Robert in Charleston. I only have 30 seconds, so I can't go to either of you, but I do appreciate you calling in and holding on. And if either of you call back in tomorrow, you're going to be first up in the queue, I promise. And I appreciate you, your contribution with these calls. Because it's not an open forum town hall unless we have people calling in, and I appreciate all of you that do. But it's radio, it's live, unlike the competitors. We are live and we're national every single night. And couldn't have done it without you and the great team in the studio and our great team booking the guests. It's a big task here, but we do it every day for you, the listener. So God bless you. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night. And let's do it all again tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. There's more programming on this station.